Hello. Hello out there, folks. Ah, hi, Sarah. Hi, friends. Welcome, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Thank you so much for joining us. It's great to see you. Welcome to White Nationalism and the Doom Loop. Please take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat. We'd love to hear your name, any organizational affiliations, like if you organize, tell us with who. And one word or phrase, how you feel about politics right now. So name, organizational affiliation, if any, and one word or phrase for how you're feeling about politics right now. I will model. I'm Nicole, and I organize with Community Ready Corps Allies and Accomplices, which you'll hear more about, and also Care for Community Action. And my word or phrase that describes how I'm feeling about politics right now is I'm gonna say demoralized. I often feel demoralized. But we're gonna do your political pep talk tonight, so don't worry about that. I'll shake it off. But tell me how you're feeling. Feeling stressed. Nikki's feeling stressed. Sarah's feeling grim, depressed. Ooh, look at all this rage, fear. All right, we have feelings. You're in the right place. This is a political pep talk. There is a lot going on right now, and I know that it can feel really overwhelming. Our hope is that you'll leave this webinar feeling inspired and motivated to go out and do something, and that you'll be armed with analysis that you can use to actually make sense of what's happening. You'll understand the play, you'll be able to spot it and spot the players. This webinar will last approximately 2 hours. We'll be out of here by 8. So I encourage you to take care of your needs throughout the presentation. We are recording this webinar, so all of the content will be available. If you miss anything, you can go back and watch. We're using Zoom auto captioning, so to access that, please follow the, let's see. If you go down to captions, you can turn them on. All right, seeing so many people in the chat. I'm seeing fear, rage, ugh, frazzled. Thankful for spaces like this. Amen. Me too. Me too. We definitely want to encourage you all to engage in the chat throughout the webinar. As always, no hate speech, harassment, or abuse will be tolerated in this space. So if you came here to be hateful and disruptive, you will be removed from the meeting, so that we can get through this together. And with that, I'm going to introduce Turha Ak from Community Ready Corps.
Hello. Can everybody see me?
Yes.
All right. Give me 1 second. I'm in motion here, so I'm doing multiple things as we are reporting from the field, right? As we typically do. I'm leaving one event, prepping for, ironically, a good neighbor program. So we'll talk more about that a little bit later. So what we want to talk about first is I want to introduce you to CRC, because we don't take for granted that you know who we are. Some people do, some people don't. I have been an organizer in Oakland for the last almost 40 years. Been organizing most of my life, grew up in union halls, and got involved in organizing early on in life. So I've been in this space for a long time. But CRC specifically grew out of us leaving one political entity, one political organization. And we did that shortly before the murder of Oscar Grant. And when Oscar Grant was killed, we say assassinated, by the BART police. We got involved in Oakland politics in a different way. We got involved in the protest movement. We got involved in that in specific, that movement in specific. And CRC was born in that moment because we were leaving one political entity. We wanted to step into this political space with a way for people to organize or identify us and organize with us organizationally. So that's where Community Ready Corps was born. And that was 2009. And here we are in more advanced in a more advanced iteration, but definitely have built from there. And so with CRC, we are a self-determination organization. We use the term self-determination for some very particular reasons, because people talk about revolution, people talk about assimilation, people talk about these different modes. We're saying that we assess the conditions and we move accordingly. So that's important. And we're not going to dive into all of the details of CRC. And you can go to our website to check those things out. But in a sense, it's very important for you to understand that we're a self-determination organization. We can go to the next slide. What undermines us or underpins our ideology is Minister Huey P. Newton's definition of power. It says, power is the ability to define phenomenon and make it act in a desired manner. I'm gonna read it again. It says, power is the ability to define phenomenon and make it act in a desired manner. This is so important because our whole way of approaching things is that we have to control the conditions around us to whatever degree we can. We say we do that through organizing, so that we create the outcomes that are beneficial for our communities. And again, this could be a whole webinar in and of itself, the CRC strategy of change. But I'm just going to touch lightly on some things so you understand as just an introduction to what we're doing today, right? But we believe that we should be organizing ourselves to do what we call facilitating the flux. This is a concept that we say that change is the only constant, and that after we have factored and figured the flux, that it is our highest state of achievement to facilitate the flux. And that means to control the shifting conditions around us. And we say that we do that through organizing. And again, this is rooted in the definition: power is the ability to define phenomenon and make it act in a desired manner. Next slide. We want to ground you all in a definition of white nationalism and white supremacy. And the reason why that's important is because we have been given a conception of one iteration of white nationalism, but that's usually petty and secondary white nationalism. By no means when I say that, do I mean that it's not impactful, that it's not dangerous, that it's not deadly. We say secondary because they are primaries that are financing, resourcing, and doing white nationalism on a global and national scale. They have created nation states. And so therefore we separate white supremacy as the ideology that underpins a concretized system called white nationalism. White nationalism, America is a white nationalist endeavor. It's a white nationalist success. Europe is a white nationalist success. Russia, a white nationalist success. These are nation states driven by the ideology that white people are superior, should remain in the superior position materially, because we're not talking about abstract terms that white people are better. No, these are folks who actively work and organize themselves, resource themselves every day to make sure that there's white hegemonic control. Fact of the matter. And one of the reasons why we get confused and why we want to have these definitions, people say, well, no, there are black people involved. There are these folks in it, but every one of them falls second to white people. And what I mean by that is that white wealth exceeds all of ours, even when we're wealthy. And so those are the manifestations of white nationalism and the concretized manifestations of white supremacy. And so we want to distinguish that America is a white nationalist endeavor. That's important because when you see the tiki torches, and I don't know who remember how many people remember that. When you see the Klan hoods, when you see skinheads, remember that those are petty secondary white nationalist entities. Next slide. And I think it's important to root us in that understanding because what we're talking about, we have to put it in its context globally, locally, nationally, but we have to put it in context. So when we're addressing these forces that we're about to talk about, we have to understand and try to figure out where we place them because to address a thing, you have to understand it. And when we don't understand it, what ends up happening is we think we have addressed the issue adequately, and all we've done is attacked and addressed one minor aspect of it, while the root of it, the source of it, persists. And so then we're frustrated because we haven't addressed it on the deepest level. And that's what organizing has to be able to do. So clarity is a key component to successful organizing. We have been doing this organizing around fighting white nationalism on all the levels for a long time. I don't know if anybody on this webinar and how many people on here are familiar with during the first Trump administration when the Bay Area specifically was a target and we had all of these different organizations and entities that were pushing into the Bay, right? We had all of these entities that were coming to do a thing in the Bay. And we saw huge fights in Berkeley. We saw people coming in. We saw what is it, Milo Yiannopoulos? We saw all of these national figures who were descending on the Bay. We were central in the leadership and pushing back on that. We were central in being able to pull all of the different elements together. Necessarily agree on tendencies. We were able to get agreements on how we would engage, get agreements on what folks wouldn't do, how they would. And that wasn't a perfect set of circumstances, but it worked well because we ultimately were able to push back those efforts. Now, when I say we, I'm not saying that that wasn't the people, because it was the people. The people stood up, but we were able to help organize, direct, and galvanize folks in some critical ways. And we have been on the forefront of this. And that means also that we caught the brunt of attacks, getting doxxed, having to put people in safe houses, and some of those things have lingered over until today. So we have been on the front lines of this fight for quite some time, which is why we feel it's necessary to do this webinar, because we see certain things developing again, and it is important to inform the people, because the saying that we have, the best weapon that we have is a disciplined, organized, informed mass. That is the best weapon that we have. And so this is our effort towards that. We can go to the next slide. In this, it's important to understand why the doom loop, and why it's so important, right? My brother, Chairman Fred Hampton Jr., the son of slain Black Panther leader, Chairman Fred Hampton Sr., has a statement. He says that the objective of the state is to create chaos to restore order. I'm going to say that again. The objective is to create chaos to restore order. That ultimately, in a nutshell, is what the doom loop is about. And there's a lot of conversations we can have about how that came about, but we're not going to dive deep into that either today. We're just going to touch on it so you understand the concept and how that plays out. The doom loop is, in our belief system, often a manufactured set of circumstances. But again, we won't dive into that explanation today, but manufactured or genuine. The doom loop is the hyper focusing on the negative conditions, hyper focusing through the media, through social media, through whisper campaigns on the negative conditions. Now, that's not to say negative conditions don't exist, but there's a reason why hyper focus on those to exaggerate the impact of them, if only by minimizing a balanced reporting. So if 2 people were robbed, 2,000 people didn't get robbed, you're going to focus on those 2. You're going to hyper focus on those 2. Doesn't mean the 2 people getting robbed don't have relevance and shouldn't be addressed. But you're going to make the experience of those 2 people representative of the majority of people. What the doom loop process, narratives, does often, it is a tool of gentrification. It is a tool of exploitation. And so often this doom loop is exploited, and then the very people who resource, in Oakland's case, who have resourced public uh, um, uh, ad specialists, they have invested in people like Sam Singer. And we'll talk more about Sam Singer at a certain point. But these are professional PR people who have come in to do a thing, who are experts at manipulating perspective. And the perspective that they engineer through the doom loop doesn't mean existence conditions don't exist and problems don't exist, but they exaggerate, they amplify, and they exploit those conditions in order to get you to be afraid, to get you to back usually authoritarian, gentrification conditions. And so it gets you to say, I'm so afraid. These conditions are so bad. We hand over all authority to you to do whatever. We had people saying that even though potholes are one of the biggest sources of revenue loss for Oakland, people being injured by them, even though people cared about trash buildup in the city, that is one of the biggest issues. Even though people know that we need roads paved, we need garbage picked up, we need other city services that are essential. They said, scrap all of that and give every dime to OPD. This is what was said to folks during budget cycles. They said, we know We know we need all of these other things, but listen, let's let the city go to hell in every other way and give every dime to OPD. And that's not rational thinking. That's not rational thinking, but that was thinking that was driven by the doom loop processes. We begin to organize around the doom loop functions. And because what we saw was we needed to create something called something that was positive. And so we created this campaign, these campaigns called the positive pull-ups, right? The positive pushback. And we said in these that the goal was to amplify the positive and positively impact the negative. And that was to create some balance because we do believe in addressing the negative conditions, but we have to create balance. Else we are not creating proper conditions. If we are engaged in this scientific organizing and we only hyper focus on one aspect of things, we don't get the best outcome. So we began to organize around this. We began to pick up trash. We purchased a garbage truck. We began to do all of these things because this is where we felt like organizing, a part of the organizing. We began to pull up in the most disenfranchised communities where where the doom loopers were focused. That this is where crime is. We began to pull up in those communities. We were already operating there, but we began to intensify our touchdown in those communities to operate and organize with the communities that were most impacted, that were most under siege, that were most maligned. And so that's how our engagement around that happens. And as I said earlier, the doom loop, it helps to accelerate the gains of white nationalism. And again, that's a broad term. And we're going to get into some of that today and how it's consistently transforming. Right? Because I know when we say white nationalism, there's a knee-jerk reaction that this is a certain type of individual, a certain type of group. But the doom loop helps to move these agendas forward. We can go to the next slide. So let me move into, because again, we're all about solutions. We're all about solutions. So we're not going to talk about white supremacy without talking about white anti-racism, right? Because that's a counter to white supremacist thinking, is white anti-racist thinking, and concretizing, organizing, and organizations that are focused on white anti-racism. And that means white people who are committed to, organize, and have a disciplined approach. New text message from Ruth. To anti-racism. That is what CRCAA is. CRCAA is an entity that we called for from CRC. It's a committee of CRC of white anti-racist organizers who are following the leadership of CRC, who are assigned, and I'm sure at some point Nicole's going to tell you about the 5 methods. But it's a disciplined structure with a disciplined approach to anti-racist organizing. And so CRCA has been assigned to do some work. And the work that CRCA has been assigned to do is, first of all, organize white people. That's been the work that CRCA has been organized to do. And a part of organizing white people lands us where we are tonight. Where we are tonight is CRCA performing one of its primary functions, and that is to research white supremacy, white supremacist organization, white supremacist motions and movements. And then we help to organize that politically. And now CRCA is going to do its job tonight and give you this information that's been collected, because CRCAA's job is to combat white nationalism, white supremacy, and racism. So I'm going to, with that introduction, I'm going to hand it over to Nicole.
Thank you, Tirha. All right. Let me find out in the chat. Put something in the chat if you're in the Bay Area watching this webinar, if that's where you're based. And put something in the chat if you're not based in the Bay Area. I want to see, who are we talking to tonight? Seeing some people in the Bay. Do your chat. Okay, lots of Bay Area. And former Bay Area. Yep. And some people from around the country. So wherever you are, this content is going to be relevant to you, because the Bay Area is relevant politically, even if you don't live here. The Bay Area is a place of international political significance because there's more wealth and power concentrated in the Bay Area than any other region in the world. Who knows which corporations are based here? Throw some in the chat. Biggest corporations in the world based right here. Google, yep, Apple, totally. Meta. What else? Lots of tech companies, but what else? What about oil companies? What about banks? Chevron, that's right. Chevron, second largest oil company in the world, is right here in Contra Costa County. We've got Wells Fargo, Visa, PG&E, Clorox, Kaiser, all these corporations. And California has more billionaires than any other state. So there's 186 billionaires living in California, and 116 of those billionaires live here in the Bay Area. We also have the Port of Oakland, which is the primary ocean gateway for international cargo in Northern California. It's a major hub for international commerce, and when it shuts down, it stops the world. We also have UC Berkeley, which is widely regarded to be one of the top public universities in the world, and it educates the people who go on to become the billionaires and the governors and the judges and the senators. And this is all in the context of white nationalism, right? So all of our cities, San Francisco, Oakland, the corporations, the billionaires, the port, the university, all of this exists on stolen land that was taken in as a result of a genocide against the Ohlone, the Ramaytush, and other indigenous people. The political, economic, and social systems in the Bay Area are predatory white nationalist systems, like by default. And people don't know, next slide, that the Klan, how active the Klan was in Oakland in the 20s. This is a photo of a Klan rally at the Kaiser Center. Many of you have probably been to this venue. Yeah, there used to be Klan rallies there. By 1924, there were at least 2,000 KKK members living in Oakland. So we often think of the Bay Area as this ultra progressive place, but there's really two sides to this story, because the history of the Bay is a history of racist and capitalist oppression. It's also a history of radical resistance. So the Bay has historically been the birthplace and a hotspot for militant movements for racial and gender justice, for anti-war, anti-imperialism, and anti-capitalism. And of course, most notably, Oakland is the birthplace of the Black Panther Party for self-defense, which changed the world. And that grassroots organizing culture persists Oakland has the strongest grassroots organizing culture on the West Coast. I would argue with anyone about that. We have all these amazing organizations, Black-led organizations like CRC, Moms for Housing, Anti-Police Terror Project, that have been prominent and successful in pushing progressive and anti-racist politics. So while the authoritarian right has captured much of the government at the state and federal levels, Oakland is one of a small handful of cities, and I'm talking like one of 3 cities that has continued to elect progressives amidst the like Trump red wave of 2024. Here, this is a photo of Councilmember Carol Fife. She's the council member for Oakland's District 3, and Barbara Lee, who was recently elected mayor. And these are both ultra progressive Black women who won despite everywhere else in the country running away from this kind of political representative. And that's not just because like Oakland's progressive. These races were extremely hard won. They were not a given at all. These victories were not a given. Right-wing money has been pouring into national politics, and some of that same money is coming into Oakland's local elections. So did anybody see the Trump birthday military parade where they had all the tanks and the military marching in honor of Trump's birthday? That event was sponsored by Coinbase, which is a crypto company. It spent $134 million on state and national elections just last year, $134 million. And Jesse Pollock, who is a co-founder of Coinbase, put $385K into Oakland elections just last year. Specifically to oppose Carol Fife, a lot of money was poured into trying to take her out of the seat. Pollock helped fund an AstroTurf group called Empower Oakland. People may have heard of this, which spent over $500,000 in support of Lauren Taylor against Barbara Lee. And this was right-wing money also. Example, Max Hodak, who co-founded Neuralink with Elon Musk, gave $70K to that effort. So people often make the mistake of thinking that the Bay Area, especially Oakland, is a progressive bubble that's totally insulated from the rest of the country and the country's swing to the authoritarian right. Our argument is we have to organize against fascism in the Bay Area. We always have, and we have a critical role to play that is going to shape what happens with this movement for the rest of the country. So as Turha mentioned, CRC and CRCA have been doing this for a long time. And so I want to introduce you all to the West Coast tendency of fascism. This is Know Your Nazi Doom Looper edition. So the West Coast Doom Loop Nazis, the clearest way I can say it is these are Nazis who went to Stanford. Being a Nazi on the West Coast is about being smart, being like smarter than everyone else, pushing boundaries, getting to the future first, like through tech. So in the South, white Christian nationalism is often about like morality, like being a good moral person, which is ironic because it's an extremely immoral ideology. However, here in the Bay Area, it's about being smart. It's about saying I'm smarter than everyone else. Naturally. And this is the culture at institutions like Stanford. If we go to the next slide, there's a long, long history of the eugenics movement in California. The actual Nazis, like in Germany, got a lot of their ideas about how to create a master race from middle and upper class white people in California, who started this movement called eugenics, which was about increasing the number of good people. So basically like wealthy, able-bodied white people. Want more of those people and less poor people, Black people, immigrants, indigenous people, people with disabilities. Through that movement, tens of thousands of people were forcibly sterilized. And a third of those sterilizations took place here in California. the West Coast Nazi tendency is still a eugenics tendency. It is about what genes are best and trying to like go for that. So there's these tech companies now that are creating like design your own embryo where you can pick the genes that are going to give your baby like the best chance at a successful life. That's the kind of stuff that they're working on. Design your embryo, live forever. They're hoping that science is going to allow them to basically like transcend the human condition, which is that you don't choose your genes. Next slide. The West Coast Nazi ideology is called the Dark Enlightenment. And if it sounds like a chapter in a Tolkien book, you are correct. The Dark Enlightenment is an intellectual movement that was started by this guy, Curtis Yarvin, who you see pictured here. Curtis Yarvin is an incel blogger who lives in Berkeley, who wrote a blog, wrote a lot of stuff on his blog about rejecting democracy, saying democracy is a mistake. All the problems in the world are actually because of this bad democracy idea. What we need is authoritarian governance. He wrote a lot of blogs about how Americans need to get over our dictator phobia because everything that's worth doing in this world is done by a top-down, structure of production with one person in charge. And that's how the government should be run also. It should be run like a corporation. What goes with this rejection of democracy is the race science of the Dark Enlightenment. The dark thing that they're enlightened about, ostensibly, is that white men are genetically inherently superior to everyone else. Genetically, white men are the ones who are supposed to be the CEOs and the presidents. There's a natural hierarchy. It's how God intended it. It's scientifically proven. And none of that is true, of course, but that is their ideology. They talk a lot about the cathedral. The cathedral is like the superstructure. It's all of the educational institutions. It's all media, journalism, newspapers. Curtis Yarvin calls all of those institutions the cathedral, and his argument is basically that the cathedral has like a chilling effect on people. It sets the terms of what you are allowed and are not allowed to want politically, and we need to get rid of the cathedral because it's stomping out the really smart, brilliant politics that will solve the future, like my Dark Enlightenment that I should be appointed CEO of the US government because I'm a white man and I'm very smart. Again, still a neo-eugenics movement. They're really focused on, can I live forever? How do I have the most successful baby possible? And it goes beyond Yarvin. Like Yarvin built an audience basically because he wrapped these like really anti-American ideas of authoritarian governance in like startup culture and language. And he built an audience of people in that culture. Let's go to the next slide. An example of the audience that he built is the PayPal mafia. If you live in California, maybe you've heard about the PayPal mafia. The PayPal is a really successful startup that had a lot of people involved, and a lot of the people that were involved on the ground floor of PayPal have gone on to found other companies that have been influential. So in particular, Peter Thiel is the co-founder of PayPal. He's also the co-founder of Palantir, which is a data mining company that is currently contracting with ICE to run this authoritarian attack on immigrants. He built the technology that's helping to make that possible. His net worth is about $20 billion. So not just a billionaire, like $20 billion. He lives in San Francisco, so he's right here. I was going to say like we might see him out, but we won't. I know that he's had like a personal security team for a long time. He doesn't go anywhere alone. I guess when you have $20 billion, you kind of can't Thiel was an earlier backer of Trump, like one of the first really high profile people with money to get behind Trump in 2016, like before people thought Trump could win. He also got behind JD Vance. So he broke the record of the most money ever given to a single Senate campaign when Thiel gave $15 million to support JD Vance to run for Senator of Ohio, which he won. Obviously, when you have $15 million, you win. And Peter Thiel is a reader of Curtis Yarvin. He believes, I no longer believe that democracy and freedom are compatible. And he is really deep in the Trump administration. He has really mentored and groomed JD Vance in a lot of ways. Then we have Elon Musk. We've all been hearing and talking a lot about Elon Musk over the last few months. His net worth is $425 billion, which is impossible for me to even wrap my head around. But he's played a leadership role in all these companies, Tesla, SpaceX, which is trying to colonize Mars so that humans can go live there when these guys finish killing the Earth. X, also known as Twitter, OpenAI. Musk has a lot of money and he has dramatically scaled up his political giving. In the early 2000s, he had given less than $1 million in all his political giving over that 10-year period, and he gave to both like Democrats and Republicans at that time. And recently, there's been a very right-wing shift. So in the last presidential cycle, Musk put $190 million into making sure that Trump got elected. 190 million, which is another record break. No one has ever spent that much money on a presidential race. And you see it when Trump and Musk were fighting on Twitter. Elon's like, without me, you wouldn't even be the president and you wouldn't have control of Congress. You're so ungrateful. He straight up said it on Twitter that like, I bought this election and you owe me, basically. An important thing to understand about Musk, but also Peter Thiel and also quite a few of these PayPal mafia guys is their connections and their roots to apartheid South Africa. So Elon Musk grew up in that environment. Peter Thiel spent a lot of his formative years in that environment as well. And so it definitely informs their racial politics. Both of these actors, but specifically Elon Musk, is a strong promoter of white genocide theory, or the Great Replacement. Basically, the idea that there is a genocide in process against white people, that white people are in danger of being wiped off the face of the earth. Wasn't expecting that. Hold on one second. Let me get my notes. So all of his political activity grows out of this fear, basically, that the white race is going to be wiped out because the birth rates are too low. Musk has 13 children. He's like a natalist. He's into like white people create as many babies as possible before the genocide gets us kind of thing. And they also really believe that like anything having to do with anti-racism or DEI is just a disguise for racism against white people. And so they're vehemently against all of those programs, which is part of why Trump has prioritized attacking all those programs since getting elected. Also want to call your attention to JD Vance. Big fan of Curtis Yarvin, protege of Peter Thiel, and he is bringing these neo-reactionary dark enlightenment politics into the White House and into the mainstream. This is an important turning point. Like JD Vance being the vice president is new. People who are steeped in the neo-reaction dark enlightenment movement have not had high-ranking positions like this that we know of before. Let's go to the next slide. And the next slide. Another thing I want to point out about this type of West Coast Nazi is a lot of the West Coast Nazis cast the Chinese Communist Party in the same role that the East Coast Nazis cast Jewish people in. So white nationalists have a cognitive dissonance problem, right? Because they believe that white people are inherently superior, but they also believe that white people are in the process of being wiped off the face of the earth. So how can both of those things be true? If we're so superior and smart and strong, we shouldn't have any of these problems. So the way that white nationalists get around that cognitive dissonance is they identify like a secret powerful group that's really behind the advances that Black people and immigrants and others targeted by this, that it's really the Jews or the Chinese Communist Party that is behind these like progressive wins. So there is a tendency in the Bay Area of right wingers who truly believe that we're 50 years into a successful secret plot by the Chinese Communist Party to infiltrate and take over the Bay Area in order to commit genocide against the white race. And this conspiracy theory has even been thrown at us and the people that we organize with. Councilmember Carol Fife has been accused of being an agent or an operative of the Chinese Communist Party, which is absurd. But this is part of their cathedral, if you will. Next slide. So these doom loop Nazis have a political program. It's pretty straightforward. They don't like democracy. They want to privatize governance, which means the corporate capture of everything. Like they don't want anything to be public. They think that all parts of life should be monetized, marketed, commodified, corporate capture of everything. A big part of their program is also creating this surveillance state. So these are tech folks. A lot of them are building the kind of tools like Palantir that are used to build this authoritarian apparatus. And they're very anti-DEI and anti-education. Let's look at how this is playing out in Oakland. So originally all of this political program is the order that they're going to restore from the chaos that's created by the doom loop. So we started seeing the doom loop narrative come out of the backlash to the George Floyd rebellion and calls to defund the police. The bottom line of this narrative is that without a highly funded police state that's empowered to violate the civil rights of Black people without any consequences, this inherently criminal, dangerous, violent Black population will turn the city into a lawless, horrible place where no one is safe. So it's fundamentally a racist and specifically anti-Black narrative that militarized police are needed to like control this population. And the goal of the doom loop is to make people feel so unsafe that even those that came along with us and started to have a critique of the police department and started to understand that the budget was bloated and needed to be redirected, the doom loop sends those people right back to be like, I'm sorry, I want the police to have more money because I just want to feel safe. Next slide. I want to show one of the ways that this played out nationally, and Oakland kind of being the example. So let's play this video.
I'm Jesse Walker, city in America safe. Not only is he battling a crime wave, but he's also facing an incompetent city council that just slashed nearly $20 million from the police budget. Seems like an odd move for a city that's seen homicides and carjackings nearly double since last year. Luckily, these numbers aren't real. According to City Council member Carol Fife, it's just propaganda.
So all of the hysteria that's been going on through the media and through certain other channels is just that. It's hysteria and propaganda.
Even if there was a crime surge, locking up criminals wouldn't help. They need to be nurtured.
Investing in policing will only continue to lock folks up, but not give them the nurturing that they've never had. We're attempting to do that. And this budget does not even begin to scratch the surface of what's needed to do that.
Just last night,
He's about to tell a story about news reporters getting robbed on their way to talk to the Department of Violence Prevention. He's doom looping. He's like, look how scary and terrible Oakland is. And this played out in the national media a bunch during the debates that were happening across the country about defunding the police. Oakland was consistently lifted up as like the cautionary tale. If you don't support the police enough, if you don't get behind the police, your city's going to be like Oakland. It's this horrible, scary place. Next slide. Crime and violence did go up during the pandemic in Oakland, as it did everywhere in the world. But investing in prevention and the nurturing that Fox News is making fun of is actually way more effective. Last year, Oakland finally saw a decrease in homicides. And in fact, there was a 45 days in a row where Oakland had 0 homicides. That hadn't happened in decades. That's the opposite of the doom loop. And this was done with fewer officers on the street than there have been at other times in Oakland's history. So the reality actually disproves the narrative, but we're in a culture and in a moment in history where like perception actually trumps reality. So although the data showed that crime was going down, the public still perceived that violence in Oakland was getting worse. I want to go to the next slide. That perception was manufactured by how doom loopers use the media. So for example, if people have seen the Bay Area State of Mind account, this is one of those anonymous accounts. It's on Twitter, it's on Instagram. They're posting constantly throughout the day. And they have many, many followers, hundreds of thousands of followers. They built that following by posting stuff like outrage bait. That's their main bread and butter. So videos of crimes taking place, videos of robberies happening, any news story about crime in Oakland, they are pushing it. Next slide. Then they also do this thing that we call engagement farming, where they're deliberately posting content that is designed to generate user interaction, likes, shares, comments, reposts on the social media platforms, to exploit the algorithm to basically attract followers that they can direct to the doom loop. So they post stuff like this. They post stuff like history of the Black Panther Party or Tupac Shakur's birthday. And these look like really apolitical or even pro-Black posts, right? So they post stuff like this all the time and people follow them for that reason. They attract these followers and then they spam those followers with only negative images of Oakland and of Black people in particular. Next slide. This account and many others like it and many other actors within the doom loopers narrative apparatus, they use a lot of misinformation. Sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's not so subtle. An example was this account posted that Fenton's Creamery is planning to close due to all of the robberies that have happened. This post went up, it got tons of traction, went viral on social media. There were actual TV news stories about this supposed closure, but when they called Fenton's Creamery, the owners were like, what are you talking about? We're not talking about shutting down at all. They just created this narrative out of nowhere. And these accounts appear more organic than they are. We found out from the election reporting of the last cycle that the person that runs this account was paid by one of the political action committees that supported Lauren Taylor for mayor against Barbara Lee. So posts like this one where they're like, today's election day, and they have a photo of Barbara Lee with Shang Tao and then a photo of Lauren Taylor and are like, which one are you going to choose? Shang Tao's a criminal. They got paid to post that. They're not just like a person with a social media platform. This is a very deliberate, strategic way of building an audience and then using it. And there's a fascist creep that happens. So they start with like seemingly neutral content or maybe kind of soft anti-woke content. And that draws in an audience. But over time, they start exposing their followers to more and more explicitly racist, anti-Semitic, authoritarian content. And then they're dragging people off to Discord, Telegram, other platforms for deeper ideological organizing into the white nationalist movement. But a lot of it does start with accounts like this. Next slide. So the doom loopers get paid to build these narratives. Who's paying them? Ta-da! Surprise! It's landlords and developers. Because the doom loop really isn't about public safety at all. It's about real estate. They use public safety for political cover. They accuse electeds that have passed legislation that protects tenants from unfair rent increases and evictions. They target those legislators with, you defunded the police and you're not going to get reelected. It's all a cover. This is all about real estate, making money off of selling stolen land. So the first guy in that top left-hand corner, that's Philip Dreyfus. You've probably heard of him by this point. He's a hedge fund manager. He lives in Piedmont, doesn't live in Oakland, but spends a lot of money influencing politics in Oakland. So he funded both of the recall campaigns last year against Tao and against Price. He also started a political action committee to oppose ranked choice voting in Oakland, which was one of the first like real giveaways that he's a right-winger, because stopping ranked choice voting is one of the Heritage Foundation's national priorities. So we're like, let me look at this guy. He was able to get these recalls off, put millions of dollars into them. And then after the recall, after all this bad publicity about Oakland, he came into Oakland and he purchased 2 high-rise apartment buildings that had just gone through foreclosure. Bought them for 40% less than what the previous owner paid for them. And this is Dreyfus's first foray into buildings of this scale. So he was a property owner, but he didn't own big high-rise buildings before. But now he does, because he's able to make them more affordable after doing all this doom looping. So it's a come up for him. To his right, you see Chris Moore. This person is a board member of the East Bay Rental Housing Association, which is our local landlord lobby group that's currently under investigation from the Department of Justice for rent gouging, for organizing a criminal cartel. That's the Department of Justice's phrase, a criminal cartel to cheat renters and get renters to pay as much rent as possible by suppressing competition between landlords. So this guy, Chris Moore, he's deep in that controversy, and he also led these recall campaigns last year. Then you have Isaac Abid down in the lower bottom corner. He's another developer, very wealthy, funded these political action committees. So Empower Oakland was one, Revitalize East Bay, and really just poured money into taking out electeds who stand in the way of the doom loop political program. And those 3 guys hire guys like the guy in the bottom corner to do their dirty work, to try to get normal people caught up in the doom loop, to try to build a movement that effectively scapegoats progressives for everything that's ever gone wrong in Oakland, and basically terrorizing progressive organizers. They have the money to pay people to do that for them, and they do. And I can't emphasize enough how much this is about money. It's just, it's straight classic real estate speculation. I can get rich if I play this right. And these are the people that are actually responsible for our housing affordability and homelessness crises. Right? They are the ones jacking up the rent. They are the ones building luxury housing when we don't have any housing that people on the streets can afford. So not only are they profiting off of the crisis, they're also exploiting the public's reaction to the crisis in order to buy more buildings and advance their political agenda. So I'll show you what I mean. Next slide. . We call this the homelessness to hate pipeline. As homelessness has been increasing nationwide, but particularly in California and the Bay Area, the right has had an increasing focus on demonizing homeless people, characterizing homeless people as subhuman, parasitic, and criminal. Hating on homeless people is playing a more and more central role in the authoritarian right's recruitment efforts. So it's similar to how the alt-right used misogyny, like the hatred of women, as a recruitment tool to pull in these lonely, alienated, incel young men on the internet into the alt-right. Same playbook, different target. So now they're strategically exploiting people's frustrations and fears about growing homelessness to create this pipeline to an extreme right-wing ideology. And it's a convenient issue for the right because Black people, queer and trans people, and disabled people, all groups that experience structural oppression in the status quo system, all groups that are targeted by eugenics and white nationalism, these are the groups that are disproportionately represented in the unsheltered population. And they're the groups that the right hates. So they have poured a lot of money into developing this narrative. They have institutions like the Manhattan Institute for Policy Research, which is where Chris Rufo is a senior fellow. Manhattan Institute for Policy Research is a conservative think tank with a $16 million a year annual budget to pay people like Chris Rufo to create these narratives. This is the same institution that brought us Reaganomics, the broken windows policing theory, and the Ferguson effect, which was the idea that crime spiked as a direct result of anti-police sentiment. The Manhattan Institute sponsors thought leaders like Chris Rufo to promote the narrative that homelessness is a human problem, not a housing problem. Their argument is that housing first and harm reduction are failed policies, and that, quote, the solution to homelessness is to enforce public order. The solution to homelessness is to enforce public order. And they just pay people like Chris Rufo to make videos about this, to write articles about it, to go on TV and talk about it. And after building this career on this anti-homeless narrative, Chris Rufo has gone on to link discussion of LGBTQ issues in schools to grooming, becoming a major promoter of the anti-critical race theory hysteria. It's also a come up if you're a white nationalist. You can get very famous doing this work. Next, we have Joe Lonsdale, who's another member of the PayPal Mafia, although he's not from South Africa. Joe has amassed a $425 million personal fortune as co-founder of Palantir, which is a surveillance tech company used by ICE and the Department of Defense. He took it upon himself to create the Cicero Institute, which is basically like an ALEC for anti-homeless policy. If you're familiar, ALEC is a right-wing think tank that just pumps out right-wing legislation, mainly on banning abortions and things of that nature, and then gets them out all over the country to try to pass waves of legislation all at the same time. The Cicero Institute pushes legislation that criminalizes people for sleeping outdoors. And it also discourages public funding of permanent supportive housing. Like, it explicitly is like, don't fund supportive, affordable housing. Just throw people in jail. And this legislation has been introduced in Georgia, Texas, Arizona, Missouri, Oklahoma, Wisconsin, Tennessee, probably some more since I made this list. And Cicero, again, like, they have a strategy. They are pushing this legislation out all over the country. They're funding media around it. They funded a short documentary called Homelessness, the Reality and the Solution for Prager University. Have you guys heard about Prager University? This is a huge YouTube platform that has been reaching over 1/3 of all US residents with its short video content since 2018. According to them, they reach 1 in 3 Americans. It's funded by Christian nationalist GOP mega donors with ties to the fossil fuel industry. The Southern Poverty Law Center describes Prager University as connecting conservative media consumers to the darkest corners of the extreme right. So it's one of those pipelines. And And this documentary featured several San Francisco-based independent journalists and promotes the narrative that the primary drivers of homelessness are drug addiction and mental illness. And then that narrative goes from YouTube to Fox News to all the news, pushing public opinion and policy about this issue to the right. So this is disaster capitalism that some people are making a lot of money off of. The goal, like Turha said, is to create chaos in order to restore order. Don't build more affordable housing. We want it to get really bad on the streets so that people will back us when we say we got to get rid of these encampments. Create chaos to restore order. When you doom loop a city, you're bringing the property values down, you're reducing the city's resource base, you let things get bad enough that it actually drives people out, and then you come in and you snap it up really cheap and you flip it and you sell it. But you can also doom loop a government, which we want to argue is also happening. Doom looping a government, it's a lot like doom looping a city. It's crashing it and burning it on purpose. The goal is to get people to be like, the government is worthless and useless. Let's get rid of it. So Curtis Yarvin was the one that talked about rage, retire all government employees. That was one of his themes in his blogs, as being the answer to our current situation. Retire all government employees, which is hilarious because both of his parents were government employees. So truly, Curtis Yarvin is just coming from fuck you dad politics. He's just mad at his parents, wants them to get fired. That's actually what this is all about. Retire all government employees. This has translated, of course, into the Department of Government Efficiency. Musk actually going in and bringing all these like nerds that read Curtis Yarvin's blog posts into our federal government and just indiscriminately laying off workers, cutting funding, all that stuff. Doom looping the government. But why would you want to doom loop a government, Nicole? For what? For what reason? Then what happens? Let's go to the next slide. And let's play this video.
America, it's time to wake up and to fight. We are out of time. Human-level physical AI is likely just 10, maybe even 5 years away. It will be the most consequential tech that we will ever develop by far, easily unleashing centuries worth of typical technological progress in a matter of years. If we wake up, get our act together, and nail this critical window of human history, we will solve the vast majority of today's problems like that. But if we fail to rise to the occasion right now, then China will crush us, and that will be the end of America as the world's greatest superpower. We are officially out of time to continue tolerating any amount of backwards institutions, bureaucracy, regulations, and stupid culture wars. The solution is not to try to fix these broken, irredeemable aspects of modern society. The solution is to build anew. And here is what we are building. Introducing Frontier Valley, an entirely new, independent, massive jurisdiction for accelerating frontier tech, located right here in the heart of Silicon Valley, just 2.5 miles away from San Francisco's downtown district, which you can see the skyline of right there. This is where Frontier Valley, a wholly new, self-contained Silicon Valley 2.0, will be built. This is the Manhattan Project of our time. At a high level, this new jurisdiction will have 5 core advantages.
Are you excited for the Manhattan Project of our time? Yeah, it's a total nightmare. They're doom looping the government because they want to run the government. They want to make their own government. And they have plans to do that. They call it exit. So the neo-reaction, dark enlightenment tendency, they talk about voice, which is about having influence in the system as it currently exists, and exit, which is getting out of this system, creating a new one that they control completely. And so this is a good example of that. This company, with their little coalition that they've built around a freedom city, they've drafted an executive order for President Trump that they're calling on Trump to pass that would declare a state of emergency in order to give federal land to this company and let them start their own country on it. This federal land in Alameda, like literally across the bridge. That's what they want to do. They're like, declare a state of emergency. China is about to like outcompete us, and we have too many regulations that are stopping technological innovation. So declare a state of emergency, give us this land, let us start our own country. In Alameda. It's right here. I will say I don't think this is going to work. I think that they're very sloppy. I mean, we'll see though. This all came out, they put out all this media, this amazing video. They reached out to a lot of press. They put out all the stuff that they're sending to Trump to make it easy for him to rubber stamp and help them make a country. They haven't talked to anybody in Alameda. Everybody in Alameda government is like, we've never talked to these people. May it have the traction and lasting power of the fire festival. Yeah, right on. All right, so those are the doom loopers. Those are the doom loop Nazis that are active in California. Hopefully you understand them a little bit better now. I think when we understand them, we have a better shot at defeating them. And speaking of defeating them, I'm going to pass it to Turha to talk about how we organize effectively in this environment.
All right.
Advantages.
So I think the first thing is to not be demoralized. That's
America,
the first thing.
It's time to wake up
First
and
thing
to fight.
is to real.
We are
Fight. It's like somebody else has something to say. Well, yes, it is time to wake up and fight. I agree. The critical thing here is to not be demoralized. The hard truth of where we are right now is because we are winning. It doesn't feel like that right now. But a key thing to understand is that when you're winning, there's going to be pushback. There's a saying in radical cultures, they say when you hit power, power hits back. So be prepared. And that's the reality. We've pushed. They saw uprisings. They saw millions of people in the streets. They saw millions of people in the streets for George Floyd. They saw thousands of people in the streets for Oscar Grant, Black Lives Matter, all of these things. And whether we agree with political outcomes, political philosophies, they saw people pushing back on the establishment for whatever reason. And that pushback frightened them. There are those of us that disagree with Obama and all of in that administration. We believe that it's smash and grab, smooth and soon, so we don't necessarily believe that was a political victory. But there are people who do. There are people who see a black president as a challenge to white supremacy, to white nationalism, and they begin to mobilize. They begin to move a certain kind of way. And in moving a certain kind of way, they have arrived where they are right now. What we're looking at right now is just a continuation of the Tea Party movement. This is just the maturation. We are looking at what Naomi Klein calls disaster capitalism. It's just a different iteration with different players. But our saying is that if we understand the play, we understand the players. And so here we are. And so we are at this phase of an escalation of that activity. So the key question is, what do we do? Now, there's a lot we can say about that. That's a complicated answer, but we're going to point to a few things, one of which is our Good Neighbor program. But we're going to talk about the contribution continuum. And the CRC contribution continuum is, hold on just a minute.
While we're waiting, I want to remind folks about the Q&A feature. If you have questions about what we've presented on so far, drop it in the Q&A. Hopefully we'll have time to answer a few.
So I'm back. Let's talk about the contribution continuum. And so the contribution continuum is CRC's, an aspect of CRC's strategy of change. CRC's strategy of change is, if you go to our site, you'll see the Black Solidarity Pathway and Process to Action, a process and pathway to action. But an aspect of that and fulfilling that is based on what we call the contribution continuum. The contribution continuum is the process to gain collaboration from the community and the people in these political outcomes, right? So we say connection, cultivation, conversion, collaboration, conveyance, and back to final stage collaboration. So that means that we want to connect with the community because we believe that whatever we're doing, it is critical that the people are in unison with us, that if we're doing something, Minister Huey P. Newton said that we're not heroes and we don't strive to be heroes. We strive to organize the community to save itself. And so we have to connect with the community because often we have to be an organizing catalyst. That's all we aspire to be. We aspire to be the catalyst for organizing. So, connection, we connect through contribution. We go, we give, we contribute, we create a political relationship through that, just as the Black Panther Party did with the free breakfast program. So, after that, we get into cultivation, the cultivation of a relationship and a cultivation of a political relationship to then reach this place of converting our communities to collaborators, to collaborators. That means people who are working with us for this political objective. Then once we have gotten to this point of collaboration, then now we convey these processes to the community of where they don't necessarily need us. They know how to organize themselves. And then there's collaboration final stage that we are now operating with an independent entity, a community that knows how to organize itself, and then we can organize with that community. And so we are in the process of doing that work on a daily basis. Our Good Neighbor program is a part of that. It is us cleaning up the community with the houseless community in order to organize on behalf of something that Oakland has expressed its desire to see change. Now, be clear that when we do this, they duplicate these processes. They duplicate and mimic to undermine what we're doing, and that's currently in play. And at some point, we'll talk about some of those forces who are duplicating and attempting to undermine and compete with what we're doing. So when we talk about this process, we are talking about how we engage the community to get to this outcome of collaboration through the contribution continuum. Is there another slide on this?
I think that's it.
Okay.
Anything
So
else you want to say about it?
that's it in a nutshell. We can pick up there from I think Nicole, you can pick it up from there. Yes.
Sure. So part of CRC's strategy is to engage in the electoral arena, which they call the relief arena. A lot of people reference electoral politics as like reform. And CRC doesn't believe that these white nationalist systems can be reformed. They are irredeemably the thing that they were built to do, which is to concretize white supremacy. But they believe that they can extract relief from these systems. So while the government is inherently white nationalist, the government also has a lot of money that can either be used to help people survive or to make it harder for people to survive. So we engage. CRC created Care for Community Action to organize at the neighborhood level, so like knocking on doors. And what we're really doing is we're demystifying local government and increasing participation in the democratic process. We have a fundamental problem. One of the reasons why our democracy is so vulnerable is because Americans are programmed to approach governance like a customer who wants to talk to the manager, right? And that's not what democracy is. Democracy is about taking responsibility for and working to solve problems together and having to work across difference to do that. It's not going up and being like, this is what I wanted. I don't like my order. Can I go somewhere else? But that's how we're conditioned to behave. We're way more comfortable being customers than we are being political actors. And we need that to change, because if we're not practicing democracy, it doesn't have a value. Like literally there's no point. If we're not doing it, we don't value it, and then it's easier for them to take it away. And we believe that governance will change. Like we are in a particular historical moment where there's a huge political realignment happening, empires ending, government shifting. We believe all those things will come to pass. So our question is, how do we be prepared and competent to engage in whatever governing systems emerge and to have the ability to express power in that process? So our ask to all of you is divest from the doom loop, get off the doom scroll, and get out on the doors with us. If you live in the Bay Area, every Saturday, we're out there. Care for community action, knock doors, make friends, change the world. It's really fun. We're talking to people and we're making democracy real. And it's very quiet, basic work. But I think it's really essential. And one of the things we've noticed in this door knocking, because C4C has been door knocking every week for the last 5 years. So we've seen how things have changed over time. Like we've seen how the rights narrative machine about homelessness, like demonizing homeless people, has been successful. The way that housed people talked about the homelessness crisis 5 years ago is different from how they're talking about it now. And that's why the Good Neighbor program is so important. Because as long as it's pitted, like housed people and unhoused people pitted against each other, seeing each other as the problem, we're going to get authoritarian solutions. If we can bridge that gap and have housed and unhoused people together, united, calling for real solutions, it really undercuts their strategy. Like their strategy is dependent on us not being able to do that. So the Good Neighbor program is really awesome. You should do that too. You can sign up on our link in the chat here. We'll also send you an email after this. Those are all the links for door knocking with us and doing service days with us, which is the Good Neighbor program. Another way you can plug in, if you're interested, is you can sign up to do kit making with CRCAA. CRCAA puts together these kits, often hygiene kits, produce bags, things of this nature, that support the Good Neighbor program. So when CRC is showing up to support encampments with cleaning, they're showing up with respect and resources. They actually have something to offer. And kit making's fun. Get off your phone, get around some other people that care about these values and make some kits together. It happens every week. And that link is going in the chat as well. That is our presentation for today. So I want to take questions. I do see the Q&A from Darka. We are planning to share this recording, so we will follow up. Yes. And we've kind of done these regularly, like white nationalism and whatever the topic is over the last several years, because it's always changing. It's not a static movement at all. Any other questions about what we presented today, the organizing that's happening in Oakland to counter the doom loop? This is when I hate Zoom. I wish we were all in person and I could see your eyes and see you thinking of a question or telling me you don't have a question. Now I'm just talking to a blank screen. So with that, if there are no more questions, what are AstroTurf organizations? Great question, Kate. AstroTurf is when money initiates like a grassroots organization. So for example, when Elon Musk or Philip Dreyfus set up a political action committee or a 501c4 and they put $500,000 into it and they hire Seneca Scott to be their organizer and they go out and they recruit members and they have town halls and they create the appearance of an organic grassroots movement. It's AstroTurf because it's not grassroots. It's coming down from above with money and creating the appearance of an organic grassroots movement. Right on. Yeah, this thing from Tyranny, talking about the importance of making eye contact in small talk. That is so real. And I mean, I'm such a door knocking evangelical, but I really think that door knocking is the most revolutionary thing that we can be doing right now, because especially after the pandemic, people are really isolated and alienated. And even just having a face-to-face conversation where we're making eye contact, where people learn that it's safe to talk about politics, you know, that we're not going to like argue with them, or people are afraid and unpracticed with how to even talk to each other at all, much less about these issues. So every time we are having a conversation at a door, we're chipping away at that culture and creating something new. And we're going to need that. If there are no more questions, we will head out early. Question, can you say more about how you're seeing the doom loop in the local government? Like gaslighting council members seems like a way that it happens. Our local government is definitely a mess and it is definitely being doom looped. How do I see it playing out? One example I would say is like there was a lot of politicking inside City Hall. People left over from the Schaff administration who were doing things to undermine and sabotage a progressive administration.
I definitely have some perspective on that.
Please.
I think everything that we've seen up to now for the last few years has been the result of doom looping. I think Philip Dreyfus, Isaac Abid, different folks like that investing in recalls to recall progressive candidates and really pairing that recall with media campaigns that drove a perception of Oakland and our assertion that there were blue flus to go along with that. That there was deliberate police inactivity that drove the crime wave. And so when you culminate all of those things, and this is said, believed, because Sam Singer is the representative of the OPOA, the Oakland Police Officers Association, which according to a lot of the rank and file doesn't really represent the perspective of the rank and file. So the OPOA was represented by Sam Singer. And again, we didn't go deep into who Sam Singer was, but he's the evil PR guy. He was hired by, I think it was Chevron, to cover up the destruction of indigenous rainforests and populations by Chevron. And that's who Sam Singer is. That's who he's been hired by rapists and to cover up their exploits in companies. That's who Sam Singer is. He represents the OPOA, the Oakland Police Officers Association. But that is that in unison, and he works directly with several folks who were reported a recall. As a matter of fact, he was directly attacking myself, Councilmember Carol Fife. They were all collaborating to create this doom loop that resulted in the recall of Shang Tao. What was coming out now, even about the indictment has not been validated. Like when we talk about the indictment, when you study the indictment, they don't have much. I was privy to when we saw news cameras coming out of, we saw the feds coming out of Shang Tao's house with boxes. I saw the inventory list of what the feds took out, and it could all fit in a freezer bag, a Ziploc freezer bag. That's how much they actually took from our house. But they came out with boxes like there was mountains of evidence. They haven't produced any evidence up to this point. If you look at the documentation, they said she wasn't a person of interest, and now she's now facing 90 years. But all of that happened. The indictment that initially she wasn't a person of interest. Now she is one of the primary persons of interest. But all the lawyers that I know that have looked at the paperwork, they've said that there's not anything there. But they launched this campaign in time for the special election. They launched the new phase of the indictment rolled out right before the special election. The person who was the head of the Department of Justice that was launching this got appointed to be the special commissioner over the Department of Justice in San Francisco after removing the black man who was there previously. This is the same by the Trump administration. This is the same person who was over the Shang Tao indictment. They just got appointed by the Trump administration to oversee the Department of Justice, the branch in San Francisco. That whole thing was an attempt to attack progressives in general. So now what's coming out is, and this is coming out over the last few days, we always knew that the primary impetus for the indictment is a person named Mario Juarez. Mario has been indicted on multiple counts, multiple times, has a history of being a bad actor in the city of Oakland, a so-called criminal past. But Mario was caught first for mail fraud, and Mario turned state's witness, and their whole case was based on Mario's testimony, which is now falling apart. So there was never any evidence other than what Mario, who was caught for mail fraud, and you never hear any of this in the news stories because they chose to hyper focus on one aspect of it in order to create a perception. And so how that's playing out in Oakland politics, we saw that when Barbara Lee ran, they attempted to use Shang Tao as a bludgeon. When Carol ran, they attempted to use Shang Tao as a bludgeon. None of it worked, but they attempted to. And this is all doom loop politics, doom loop maneuvering. And so many people now, right? The new DA was installed by the doom loopers. She was their pick. And so how this is playing out in Oakland politics, and several of the city council members now have relationships with those doom loopers, is just not popular. So, and they're losing momentum, but they are impactful at this point. So that's in a nutshell how it's playing out in Oakland politics.
Right on. Thanks for sharing that, Terha. If there aren't any more questions, would love to hear one thing you're taking away from this webinar. One thing you learned, one thing that you can apply, one thing you're taking away from the webinar tonight will really help us. Your feedback is super, super helpful. So please share one thing you're taking away from tonight's presentation. Need to devote time to door knocking. Love to see it. Love to see it. Deb, thank you. We'll be able to use the idea of the doom loop in so many places. Yeah, it's coming up lots of places. When you hit power, power hits back. Damn it, it's so true. When you push power, power pushes back. What else? Would love to hear one thing you're taking away from the presentation tonight. Creating chaos to create order, restore order, yep. Okay, the relief system can't be reformed, but we can extract relief. Right on. Greed and racism fueling doom loopers, capitalism, but there's hope. Hell yeah. And we have power through organizing. We do. More power than I think we do, you know? I said it was a political pep talk and Sarah feels pepped. Right on, Sarah. I'm glad we could. That was the goal. Organizing in solidarity. Right on. Thanks, everybody. If you're still typing or if you're thinking about typing something, would be so grateful for your feedback. Please share in the chat what you got out of this, if anything. And with that, have a great night, everybody.